deliver this special feature. The Rhetorical Collective, a group which I am a part of, would like to speak to you about our final year thesis. Our study is a qualitative one, and it is meant to analyze the rhetorical appeals contained within two political speeches and their varying interpretations by the listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. You may ask yourselves, why did we choose this topic? Well, Schaffner in his 1997 article indicated that speeches delivered on political platforms during electoral campaigns are often able to engage their audiences on matters that are important to the national dialogue. These varied issues are designed to appeal to the audience in different levels. In fact, political parties often use rhetoric to promote this very intent. We narrowed down our research study to a local context. At the time of the 2015 general elections in Trinidad and Tobago, two political parties dominated the political landscape: the People's Partnership and the People's National Movement. Both parties relayed their respective campaign messages utilizing the primary channels of speeches. The issues presented by both political parties, yes, they may have varied, but they were communicated in a way to engage the audience's different interpretations. Our rationale for this study stemmed from the fact that since speakers often use rhetorical appeals and figurative language, it is imperative to examine the extent of effectiveness of these methods. Therefore, since political leaders utilize the power of persuasive language in their political speeches, it is important to examine the interpretation of these speeches by the listening public, especially at such a crucial time in our nation's history. Thank you for your undivided attention so far. My co-host Avion will be up shortly and she'll be elaborating on the aims and the objectives of this study.
Thank you, Emily, and good afternoon, viewers. Now you may be asking yourselves, what is the aim of this study? Well, our aim is to identify the rhetorical devices employed in political speeches during the 2015 parliamentary election and to examine how these devices are interpreted by the listening public of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, we are not investigating whether the appeals influence voters' decision or how appeals could impact the outcome of a general election. What we are investigating is what are the types of appeals employed within political speeches and how do we as an audience in listening to these speeches interpret them. Now, this leads us to our objectives, which are the actions we will be undertaking in order to achieve our aim. Now, this study has two main objectives. One, to provide a comprehensive analysis of the rhetorical appeals found in two political speeches delivered by the two main contenders, the People's National Movement and the People's Partnership during the 2015 parliamentary election in Trinidad and Tobago. Two, to evaluate how the listening public interprets these messages contained within the political speeches taken from the 2015 parliamentary election in Trinidad and Tobago. Further details on answering these objectives will be provided later down in the program. That's all from me right now. Back to you, Emily.
Joining us remotely is Katrina. She's going to be discussing the literature review that was employed within our study. Katrina was supposed to be a part of our panel, however, due to COVID, she cannot be physically here. Katrina, are you there?
Thank you, Emily.
You hearing me?
Are you hearing me now? Okay, good. Scholar James Martin in 2015 elaborated that speakers use several elements such as emotions, tone of voice, body language, their status or authority, and the use of specific language in order to make their argument have desirable effects on the audience. This aids the listening public in forming possible interpretations based on the content and concepts manifested during respective speeches. It also aids in understanding the various structures of language and speeches. We'll now see how different theories work within the main aspect of our study, political speeches. Triadaphilos highlighted rhetoric within politics in his 1999 article entitled Politics, Speeches, and the Art of Persuasion. He showed that political speeches, they have the power to transform society and change citizens' lives. And for his political speech to be truly successful, the rhetorical appeal of pathos, your heart, logos, your rationality, and ethos, a speaker's credibility must be well balanced. Moving on, in Dana Anderson's review of the elements of dramatism, we see dramatism within politics. Here, language is said to both enable and constrain our interpretation of human action through the analysis of the dramatistic pentad of act, scene, agent, agency, and purpose. With this, we see the varying strategies that politicians utilize in delivering their speech. Lastly, in Derek Trady's 2011 Theories in Social Psychology within the chapter The Elaboration Likelihood Model of Persuasion, written by Wagner and Petty, we see this elaboration model within politics. Through this, the elaboration continuum is seen as the amount of elaboration or thinking done about relevant messages or issues. Essentially, this is directed not at the political leaders or speeches, but at the listening public to assess the level at which they critically understand and analyze what is being said to them. So, there we have it with the review of scholarly work within our study post, and now hand you back over to Emily in the studio.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Up next is Shraddha, who will discuss the theoretical frameworks that were used within our study and present the methodology. Take it away, Shraddha.
I'll dive straight into our theoretical framework. So it's not possible to do a study in rhetoric without making mention of Greek philosopher Aristotle. According to Griffin, Ledbetter, and Spark in 2019, Aristotle developed the theory of rhetoric to explain the means of persuasion. He identified that in order for language to be persuasive, it must contain three appeals: ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos demonstrates a speaker's credibility, which consists of their level of intelligence on respective topics. Pathos illustrates a speaker's ability to elicit emotions from the audience, and logos consist of his speech's ability to appeal to the listener's rationality. Therefore, Aristotle's theory was instrumental in our research, as it allowed us to analyze ways in which both political speakers' rhetorical style influenced the formation of respective speeches, as well as to ascertain which of the three appeals resonated most with the listening audience. In addition, Kenneth Burke's dramatism served as our second theory, as it critically analyzes language, not only as a means of conveying information, but also as modes of action, crucial to understanding parliamentary dialect, a point critical to our study. Burke furthered his theory with a dramatistic pentad, which comprises of answering the questions of who, where, what, when, why, and how in any dramatic situation or speech. Hence, the pentad was applied to analyze each political leader's presentation, as it aided in identifying the respective speakers, the delivery of the speeches, the scene, setting, motive behind each of the political address, and the potential impact on audience interpretations. Finally, the last theory was John Cacioppo and Richard Petty's elaboration likelihood model. This theory analyzes the cognitive routes involved in the interpretation of both verbal and non-verbal forms of persuasive communication. There are two routes. Firstly, the central route, which involves high levels of elaboration, and the listener pays close attention to the message, while in the peripheral route, there are low levels of elaboration and no further examination of the message. This theory was useful in that it helped the analysis of data derived from the research participants' interpretation. Since our study sought to analyze the ways in which the listening public interprets messages, determining whether audiences use their central or peripheral route was crucial in understanding the function of rhetorical appeals and their impact on the listening public. And there you have it, folks, the three theories guided our study. So in order to obtain information with minimum bias, a multi-method qualitative approach was adopted for data collection and analysis, in the form of content analysis, focus groups, and thematic analysis. Firstly, according to Berg and Loon in 2017, content analysis is a careful analysis of a particular body of text to identify patterns, themes, assumptions, and meanings. This included the use of codes and coding manuals. Codes are words or phrases generated by researchers derived from the studied text, while coding manuals are frameworks that record extracted codes from the qualitative data, which were the political speeches, into coded themes and patterns. Secondly, a focus group is an interview style designed for small groups formed by an investigator and led in a group discussion format. As you'll see on screen, the chosen population and sample frame was a UWI St. Augustine campus. The sampling size was 12 persons, which consisted of 6 undergraduate non-working full-time students and 6 undergraduate working part-time students. The sampling method utilized was convenience sampling, a non-probability sampling method based on sourcing participants through the convenience of researchers. Here, the research participants were divided into 2 groups of 6 and shown the same 20-minute video footage of the selected political speeches. 2 moderators per focus group facilitated the discussions and utilized a guide of 6 to 8 questions for the discussion. Some of the ethical considerations taken were the acquiring of informed consent by participants, the protection of anonymity and confidentiality of the participants, avoidance of deceptive practices by members, and lastly, providing the participants with the right to withdraw. This brings us to our data analysis method, defined by Brown and Clark in 2016 as the process of identifying patterns in qualitative data. Thematic analysis allowed the researchers to analyze the 2 political speeches' content as well as the focus group data. Here, patterns and codes were carefully observed, and in the instance of the research participants, commonalities were identified among each participant's varying interpretations of the footage of the respective political speech.
Thank you very much, Shraddha. Join us again are Avion and Katrina, who will be presenting to you our results.
Good day again, viewers. The following is a presentation of our results. 4 research questions were developed to streamline the study's objective. Research question 1 asks, what are the messages found in both the PNM and the PP's political speeches during the 2015 parliamentary election campaign in Trinidad and Tobago? Both political speeches contain similar messages as shown in the intersection of the Venn diagram. Also, while both speeches contain similar messages, each speaker structured their messages differently based on their respective intent. For example, Dr. Rowley's core messages express national restoration by addressing the importance of national identity, reform of governmental agencies, and future initiatives for socio-economic development. Overall, Mrs. Prasad Basessa's message was spirituality, emphasized through the use of biblical references. Messages of hope were deliberated through detailed accounts of her government's achievements meant to encourage continued confidence in her leadership and governance. Research question 2 asks, what are the most frequently used rhetorical appeals utilized within the 2 political speeches of the 2015 parliamentary election in Trinidad and Tobago? As illustrated in Figure 1.2, both political speeches significantly utilized the 3 rhetorical appeals. However, Mrs. Prasad Basessa's speech used more logos in comparison to Dr. Rowley's speech. Dr. Rowley's speech utilized the pathos appeal frequently, evident through his application of literary devices, rhetorical questions, repetitions, and connotations, while Mrs. Prasad Basessa used pathos when illustrating biblical and cultural references. Finally, both speeches outlined their speaker's political career and service to country, demonstrating the ethos appeal. Ethos was used more in Dr. Rowley's speech as shown in Figure 1.2. His delivery of messages linked to ethical commitment and years of service to people of Trinidad and Tobago emphasized this. Katrina will now continue with the other half of the results forecast.
Thanks, Avion. I'll just continue along the same lines of you and hope my forecast is as good as yours. We now move on to research question 3. How did the listeners perceive speeches containing rhetorical appeals and languages? As you'll see on screen in Figure 1.3, the majority of the participants perceived that Ms. Kamla Prasad Basessa utilized more pathos in her speeches than logos and ethos. Participant 1 solidified this by stating, most of her speech pointed towards emotions. She appealed to different people of the audience. Whereas, Dr. Kate Rowley utilized more ethos and logos. Participant 12 indicated, I do think that Dr. Rowley used more logos in his speech because he did not use as many cultural references as Ms. Basessa. Participants also perceived, as shown in Figure 1.4, that there were a variety of figurative language used within each speech. Dr. Rowley had high levels of repetition in comparison to Ms. Prasad Basessa. Also, the usage of metaphors which were on a 2-to-3 ratio pp to pnm, as well as the usage of allegory and juxtaposition, which were on an even ratio of 1-to-1. We'll now take a look at the results forecast of participants' perception, which we use question 4. How did listeners' varying perceptions aid in their interpretation of respective political messages? To answer. The majority of participants utilized their varying perceptions to interpret whether each political speech was effective or not in their many messages. Focus Group 1, which consisted of the 6 full-timers, perceived that both speeches had a standard low level of message effectiveness. Focus Group 2, which consisted of the 6 part-timers, perceived the low levels of effectiveness towards Mr. Prasad speech, but high levels of effectiveness towards Dr. Rowley's speech. Further, in Focus Group 1, one participant perceived that both speeches weren't effective, while 4 participants perceived that both speeches were equal in its message effectiveness. Lastly, Focus Group 2, 2 participants perceived that both speeches were equal in its effectiveness. And there you have it on our study's results forecast.
Linkages between research questions 1, 2, 3, and 4, our theoretical frameworks and scholarly sources are as follows. Martin 2015 stated that politics reflects the beliefs of members of the political party. Both leaders used messages to deliberate their political ideologies. Common themes within both speeches included corruption, oppositional shortcomings, and future initiatives. Triadopoulos indicated that successful political speeches contain well-balanced appeals, no one outdoing the other. We see in Figure 1.2 that all 3 appeals were employed, adding to the persuasive intent, but were improperly balanced. Participants identified the rally setting, coupled with scenes in the park, and the motive to win the election as aiding their understanding of the speech's rhetorical strategies and appeals, echoing Kenneth Burke's dramatic pentad. Participants also viewed speeches as strategic devices to define Martin 2015's notion. Some participants listened to Dr. Rowley using a central route. Many used the peripheral to listen to Ms. Prasad, classifying her speech as too emotional. Trevine is next with our preliminary conclusions.
In conclusion, I now present 3 preliminary points derived from the data collected. Firstly, the data indicated that a strong correlation exists between the rhetorical appeals and language utilized by speakers in the construction of their ideological views. This was detailed by both speeches. Secondly, the utilization of each appeal by the respective political leaders strongly affected how individual participants interpreted both political speeches. This was particularly demonstrated in instances where speakers chose to employ one rhetorical appeal or strategy more than another. Lastly, the analysis of the emotional appeals contained within Mrs. Prasad-Bissessa's speech also brought to the forefront the relationship between language, rhetoric, and the perceived gender stereotypes associated with men and women. For instance, whilst analyzing both speeches, participants indicated that Mrs. Prasad-Bissessa's speech contained more emotional appeal than Dr. Rowley's speech, hence reinforcing the existing perceived stereotypes associated with gender and language. Now back to you, Emily.
I would like to take this time to issue a heartfelt thank you to my co-hosts and to you, the viewers. So until next time, also remember to stay home, stay safe, and practice social distancing. Bye!